Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Team Skeptic, and Erik, welcome. Team Skeptic still has not put his graphic up, but there we are. We can't have everything, I suppose. Yeah, come on now, Team Skeptic, sort it out. You're meant to be a professional streamer. How could you let me down like that? I'm horrified already. I'll hand everybody straight over to Conspiracy Cats, who will run everybody through the evening's festivities. Is festivities
I
the right
am
word?
looking forward to this one for two reasons. One, I think the topic is it's a topic that's got everybody's interest at the minute, so I'm really looking forward to that being discussed. But secondly, the two people we've got debating on, I have just like an enormous amount of respect for. When I first started making videos myself, Team Skeptic was up there in my top two, if not 22 favorite. No, I'm kidding. Team Skeptic. It was up there in my top two favorite YouTube channels, and still is. You know, I'm a massive fan. Erik Hare that we've got here. I'll put the link to his channel in the description. I think everyone knows who Team Skeptic is. You can find him dead easy. Erik Hare's got a link to his channel in the description, and he's been a subscriber to loads of people in the community since I think we started. But after speaking to him yesterday in person, and after watching the videos he puts on his channel, he is such an extremely articulate and knowledgeable guy that I'm just really looking forward to what I'm going to hear tonight. So I mean, I'll not keep waffling on because you're not here to look at my big ugly mug and listen to me talk. So I'm just going to allow the two people to introduce themselves. I think you all know what Team Skeptic is anyway, but Team, I'll let you go first. You want to just introduce yourself and then...
Yeah, I'll keep my introduction to a minimum because...
Oh, sorry, not the introductory spiel just yet, just a hello. Like, tell people about yourself.
Yeah, I'm not creaky, I understand. And I appreciate that backhanded compliment of being your second favorite YouTuber with the millions of them that are out there. Thank you very much. I'm Team Skeptic. I'm here to party. Erik Hare is I've had the pleasure of watching a few of his videos. He is very articulate. I think that he and I would find ourselves agreeing on many things that, you know, we might disagree a little bit today, but I think even on this topic there, we could find ourselves in a position of agreement on a lot of things. And Conspiracy Cats nailed it. You're very articulate, and I anticipate a very intriguing conversation with you.
Erik, tell people about yourself. Advertise, shill yourself out, man. Your channel link's in the description. You know, now's your moment.
Myself. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I've been a fan of all of you guys for quite a while. Not because I care about the shape of our planet, just I care about the fact that people debate it. But that's okay. And team, I love your stuff. It's my guilty pleasure to put a little ding every time I use the word idiot. I do that every day. Okay. So it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I've been a blogger. I'm actually a writer for a living. I often say that I translate technobabble into English. And that's what I do. I recently moved to San Francisco area. But I've been a blogger since 2007. I kind of gave it up when life became busy. And I thought, let's just try this YouTube thing. Let's try something different. Let's try. To me, life is a big experiment. I'm actually trained as a chemical engineer. So that's a past life long before. So I have a different approach to everything. And I know we are going to wind up agreeing with a lot of things. I'm going to try to start with the controversy and try to hit hard, but basically, to me, this is like a bar room or a pub conversation that I think everybody should be having.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a very important topic, isn't it? You know, especially at the minute. So I'll keep out of this as much as I can because I know you're both very articulate and you're both, you know, very, you know, got a lot of respect for each other. So I'm anticipating this to be great. The only thing that's got to be decided is who opens first. Do you want me to toss a coin? Or have you? Is anyone personally?
You know, I actually have all the spotlight when compared to us three up here, us four up here. Most of the people watch me all the time to find your videos, so I'll let Erik Hare go first and give him the spotlight. And everybody, please go out there and sub to Erik Hare. He does spread a good message out there. So Erik, it's up to you. You can go first or second.
I'll take it first because I do have a little prepared speech in my little mind. It's in my noodle. Um, so yeah. Well, we set it up. When we say Black Lives Matter, it's been in the news for many years, and it's been very, very hot recently. So everybody has an opinion going in. I'm a supporter of Black Lives Matter. Why? Well, when we say Black Lives Matter, it's not about special rights or privileges for one race over another. It's not about smashing the police and creating chaos. It's not about it. What it really kind of comes down to is that all lives do not matter, at least not the same. We say Black Lives Matter because we want justice and we want the killing to stop, is really what it comes down to. Now, I know it's a little weird to have a white guy representing. First of all, it's really important that I say I am not a member of Black Lives Matter Global Network, and I'm not an official in any of the chapters around. I've just been involved in the movement for a very long time, and we can discuss this. I used to live in St. Paul, Minnesota. If you remember, Minneapolis, just next door, was the epicenter of the whole George Floyd riot. And so I've been involved in this for a very long time. And to me, it's a human rights issue more than anything else. And it's about constructing a world that we all want to live in, regardless of who we are. Now, when things fall apart, it does fall disproportionately on one group over another. And that's because of, well, I would say institutional racism is a core problem in America. It's been there since the very beginning. I mean, to be an American is to believe that everyone is created equal, and we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, living up to that little catechism has always been difficult. I mean, the man who wrote that owned slaves. But to me, that's what this is all really about. And that's why I support Black Lives Matter. And getting into the details as to what it really means to me and to the people who live it is going to be important. Now, as a white person, there's only so much I can say about the Black experience in America. We live in a very segregated world. But I hope I can demonstrate why I support this and why I think this conversation is extremely important to have, regardless of where you're coming from in it, to understand and empathize with each other. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, team.
Brilliant.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Brilliant. Well, while team's getting themselves sorted, that was extremely articulate. I really enjoyed that. Thanks, Erik. Creaky, have you seen anything in the chat you want to raise just while team's getting ready?
Not so far, to be honest. Not so far. Everybody is keeping it fairly friendly and respectful so far. So nothing to report, Mr. Catz.
But everyone, it's nice to see some familiar returning faces as well.
And, we seem to be seeing the same faces every week, which is nice. And hopefully, the more people visit the channel and watch the discussions that we host, the more they'll realize that it's not about one being right, one being wrong, or creating an argumentative environment. It's about grown-ups discussing things that they may agree or disagree about.
Fantastic. Team, how are we doing, buddy?
I'm ready to go when you guys are.
Take it away, man.
All right. Well, hey, guys. Today we have come together to talk about probably the hardest topic I've had to discuss since starting my YouTube channel. I do want to first thank Mr. Hare for having this discussion with me. It seems more often than not that people have an opinion on this topic we're discussing today, but are just too afraid to put their names and faces behind their opinion. And I appreciate that. So thank you. Today we take a look at the Black Lives Matter group and discuss whether their ideology will progress humanity forward or drag us backwards. I feel like there's an obligation on my part to differentiate my feelings towards the Black Lives Matter movement and the communist organizations such as Black Lives Matter and Antifa, because there is a difference. I believe Mr. Hare said it right in his recent video and again today, that Black Lives Matter isn't about Black lives meaning more than white lives. It's that all lives matter equally. And it seems as though society has forgotten that Black lives are just as much a part of all lives as any other color out there. So I would like a central message today to stick with everybody, that Black lives do matter, that all Black lives matter. And it doesn't take a politically agenda-based organization creating divide to instill these beliefs deeply in today's society. So let's first start by stating what Black Lives Matter is. And before I begin, there are, I have 10 references that Creaky has put into the description. So everything I talk about here will be referenced in the description so that anybody can go and see these facts for themselves. Let's start by stating what we're going to be talking here, Black Lives Matter is. And I'll be referring to the Black Lives Matter organization as BLM moving forward. BLM is a neo-Marxist far-left organization whose true focus is the destruction of Western capitalism and defunding and abolishing law enforcement. This isn't my conjecture. According to Janaya Khan, co-founder of BLM in Toronto, BLM wants to take money out of police budgets, slowly phasing out police because we don't need them. They don't protect us. And that's a direct quote from her. BLM is not about building our communities together or fixing a system that seems to be broke. I think that's something that you and I, Eric, can probably agree on, that there does seem to be a racial bias towards the judicial system. It's broken. It needs to be fixed. There's no way society exists without law enforcement. It needs to be fixed. BLM is about removing a system that gets in the way of its political motivation. According to Ron Martinelli, an expert on police procedure, the BLM has 4 basic objectives with respect to diminishing law enforcement. They want to disenfranchise the law enforcement from the community, defund the law enforcement, diminish their involvement in the community, and dissolve the law enforcement. Disenfranchising the law enforcement is essentially turning the public against the police. I think it's fairly, I think with the growing trend we're seeing, there is an absolute growing distrust between the public and the police. I believe Black Lives Matter, the group BLM, is at the forefront of pushing that disenfranchisement. BLM does this by selectively picking which Black Life Matters and on which day, based on whether that story will help their political agenda or not. An example of their disenfranchising agenda comes with David Dorn, a Black retired police captain who was murdered while trying to stop looters at a pawn shop in St. Louis. What has BLM said about his death? Nothing. The weekend before the tragic death of Mr. Floyd, 10 people were murdered in Chicago, many of them Black, and at least one was a 16-year-old teenager. What did BLM have to say about that? Nothing. Why was BLM not there for these events? Because it doesn't fit their political agenda. And like all politically motivated organizations, it has limited resources and needs to ensure it runs efficiently. As far as defunding, diminishing, and dissolving the police, Janaya Khan said herself that those were direct agendas of BLM, and that will be one of the references. In fact, the first reference is the video to her Black Lives Matter, defund the police, so that I'm not putting words into her mouth. You can actually go see this for yourself. And let's not just focus on the Black lives that were lost due to BLM, because Black business owners are being attacked by looters as well. And what about the multitude of businesses that are owned by these Black people and destroyed by rioters and looters in the name of BLM? Again, BLM is silent. According to the 2018 FBI statistics on murder, according to the 2018 FBI statistics on murder in America, a single African American was murdered by another single person 2,925 times. 2,600 times that person was killed by a fellow African American. 234 times it was by a white person. Now, these numbers don't include the 209 African American people who were killed by the hands of police in 2018. Not only did fellow white citizens kill African American citizens more than the police, but they were also killed by their own fellow African Americans 12.4 times more often than a police officer killed them. These are stats that BLM doesn't want you to hear. Speaking of stats, if you include the 209 African Americans who were killed by police, The 2018 total of 7,407 African Americans who were murdered, you will find that the police account for 2.7% of all the killings of African Americans in America in 2018. Whereas if you add the 399 deaths of white people by police to the 6,088 white people who were victims of murder, then the police are responsible for 6.1% of all killings of white people. This is the difference of about 40 to 1 to 17 to 1, So if BLM were truly trying to help society, then why are they completely silent to all of these facts? The answer is simple. BLM is not here for the betterment of anyone other than themselves. The final point I want to bring up is about the tearing down of statues across the world. These felonious acts have been exclusively promoted and pushed by BLM and carried out during illegal looting and rioting. It's destroying the legacy of our countries and the historical struggles that our ancestors strive through to get to where this glorious nation is today. Now, someone recently pointed something out to me in a way that I can relate to, that I never, couldn't relate to in the past, and I'd like to share this with you. If I was a black man who was innocent of a felony that I was charged with, could I really put faith in a non-biased judicial system that's flying a Confederate flag on its doorstep? The question really hit home hard, and honestly, I can't imagine what that must feel like for anybody that's of race, of color, that has to go through something like that in America. So I can completely understand and support when companies like NASCAR, who've decided to completely ban the Confederate flag from their events, municipal, state, and federal governments who have removed the flag from their property, along with other symbols of hate. But to tear down these statues of people who did more good than bad for our country is abhorrent and, again, illegal. Now, I'm all for removing the statues and monuments from public view, if that's what the public wants. But they need to be preserved in a museum, not destroyed. If you're one of those people that truly supports these misguided actions, you need to ask yourself this question: where does it stop? If we're going to try to whitewash slavery from our history by destroying the monuments that we have, then why should we stop at the Confederacy? 12 of the first 18 presidents owned slaves, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, and ultimately the final president, Ulysses S. Grant. Are we to tear down monuments dedicated to these glorious men of American history? And for my science lovers out there, because you guys, you're listening to Conspiracy Cats. I know something about you. You love science. Wernher von Braun has a bust at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Von Braun was a member of the Nazi Party, an inventor of the V-2 rocket that was responsible for 2,754 civilian deaths in London. But he also put a man on the moon. We allow this to continue. How long before they come for our heroes of science? In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the following statements in an effort to dissuade anyone else from being manipulated by communist ideas, tactics, and organizations. BLM does not care about Black lives. They care about the viability and efficiency of their Marxist organization, which is focused on destroying the infrastructure of our way of life from within. Starting off by vilifying the police for doing their jobs, inflating stats, inflating numbers to over-sensationalize statistics, and to continue to incite violent riots, which counteract any positivity and advancement that could come from peaceful protests. And since BLM isn't truly here for all Black lives, let me make my last statement a statement of remembrance for George Floyd, who was murdered in cold blood by police. David Dorn, who was murdered by looters as he tried to stop them while being live streamed on Facebook. Chris Beatty, who was murdered as he tried to stop two women from being mugged during riots. And Patrick Underwood, who was murdered when protesters unambiguously opened fire on the police while he was protecting a federal building. Only one of these Black Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter. And I think it's our job moving forward to make sure the others do too. Thank you, and I turn the rest of my time over to the moderators.
Superb, superb. So both of you, you know, what I said before this debate started, that I was looking forward to it because I knew how articulate you both were, and that, you know, that's blown me out the water. This is, you know, I'm not very politically minded, you know, and I've learned a lot listening to that. So, Creaky, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, the side chat's starting to get warm. It's not heated yet, but it's warming up, and there's not really been any back and forth yet, so I think it's going to be very interesting to see which way this heads.
It is. I mean, it is. It's one of those subjects, isn't it? It's a sensitive subject.
It is.
You know, I mean, I think I know the people who are the moderators in the chat, you know, as you do, and I think we trust the moderators just to use the judgment, you know, and they can certainly tell the difference between something that crosses a line and something that, you know, that is just debate. So, you know, I'm sure they'll do his proud with that. Yeah. Listen, I don't know if you were a team or Eric. One of the things we do at the end of each round, if you like, in the debates, is we put a little friendly poll up, okay, just to see who the audience are kind of like siding with at the minute. And it's not really about the topic. It's just about who they think has presented or argued that round the best, if you like. Don't take any of it to heart, but I have put the poll up at the minute. Now, to anyone in the chat that wants to ask a question, you know you'll get your time later on. If you put your questions underneath that poll, the round one poll, that's where I'll be going later on to pull the questions out so they're all in one place. I'll not be fishing through the chat trying to find them. So if you've got a question, leave it there and I'll just read them through in order so you will get your question heard. Creaky, have you got anything to say before we do the rebuttals?
Yeah, I just remembered that 2 weeks ago I promised that by the next debate, we would have a form in the video description so people can submit questions. But unfortunately, I'm an idiot and I forgot to do it, even though I've had 2 weeks to get it ready. But I will endeavour to do better by the next debate.
Well, don't worry. Last week I forgot to get a debate organised. So.
Yeah, exactly. Just do what Catz has just said. Underneath the first poll, that's where you submit your questions, and Catz and I, well, more Catz than me, will keep an eye on the questions, and we'll take them from the community tab.
So what happens now? Obviously, you get your rebuttals, and that will be the end of round two. And then we'll get into the back and forth, which I'm really looking forward to. You know, so take as little or as long as you want, Eric, to refute anything that team has said in that, and then team will have his chance, and then we'll get to the back and forth. So over to you, sir.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you. First of all, team, I really do appreciate that we are talking about justice, a human rights issue, and that flying the Confederate flag, etc., is just outside of the scope of what any authority should be doing. But I want to go back to what Black Lives Matter is, and I think that this is a very critical point because where it started was in 2013. With the death of Trayvon Martin. If you'll remember, he was a young Black man wearing a hoodie who was walking around Orlando, and George Zimmerman took it upon himself to go after this guy who didn't look like he belonged in the neighborhood and wound up killing him. And this, at George Zimmerman's trial, it was basically suggested as openly as they could that Trayvon Martin just looked dangerous and posed an immediate threat, and that's why George Zimmerman killed him. George Zimmerman was not a police officer, he was just a guy, but he wound up getting off for the killing. And so Black Lives Matter started out as a hashtag in response to this particular event. It had nothing to do with police, the color of authority. It's just like, really? A Black guy is suspicious enough looking just for being a Black guy wearing a hoodie that killing him is okay. Really? That's how it all started. Now, one of the things that we will see through the course of these protests, and this is something that I think is extremely important to discuss, is that modern organizations, as we understand them, are not based on a top-down hierarchy. This is a feature of the millennial generation, etc. If we were to talk about, say, what does Black Lives Matter as an organization stand for? Well, on their website, none of that stuff about Marxist agenda, etc., appears in the Black Lives Matter global network. It just doesn't. In terms of how they are organized is a very loose organization of people who show up for various events. Are some of them radicals who want to tear down the system and, destroy capitalism, destroy the police? Yes, there are people involved in that. Now, you might say to yourself that the nature of this structure, that they keep it loose, they keep it based on local affiliates or whatever, is inherently dangerous. That's something we can talk about, as it were. But as a movement, we shouldn't forget that this started out as a spontaneous hashtag generation that evolved into a 501c3 and 501c3 nonprofits underneath it that support local activities to create demonstrations in response to horrific events that seem to keep happening over and over and over again. Now, I also want to address the David Dorn issue, because to a large extent, I agree with you that support for him and for other police officers who I know have been very instrumental in helping the Black community, helping reform police over the years, are just not getting the credit they want. There was a march for David Dorn. The local chapter of Black Lives Matter did indeed endorse it and participate. So it's not that they've been completely silent about that particular issue. But is it enough? What is enough? Then again, are we, when we talk about, say, there are a few bad apples in any given organization, any given demonstration, how do we hold the whole organization accountable for it? And then compare that to the argument, there are a few bad apples in the police department. Are we holding authorities to an even lower standard than we might to a citizen organization? This is the concern. My support for Black Lives Matter goes all the way back to 2013. And I have seen, basically, if you lived in St. Paul, Minneapolis was next door. My oldest child lives in Minneapolis. We've seen these police killings just regularly on, it's like it's once a year. I have been to so many protests, I cannot tell you. And nothing seems to happen. Nothing ever seems to change. That's the real issue at heart. Have some people gotten pretty radical over the years? Yes, they have. That is sort of the nature of the system, or the nature of the protests that we have. Is Black Lives Matter as a structural organization supporting what you claim, which is to say a Marxist takeover, destruction of the capitalist system? No, as an organization, it is not. However, I know that there are people who speak out for local chapters in various places who do ask for that. And there are people who participate in some of these events who are there simply to create violence, simply to burn down the system, simply to, whatever. Well, recently they wound up burning down a lot of businesses on Lake Street, as if the system gave a damn about them in the first place. So there is something horribly misdirected in some of these efforts. But the question becomes, how many people are actually involved in that versus the actual peaceful protesters? Should Black Lives Matter as an organization be more top down and be more strict about who gets to say what, who gets to do what, enforcing discipline? Well, how does the standard that we have for the authorities in that are responsible for things? I mean, that's kind of the open question. So is this institutionally what you've ascribed to Black Lives Matter? Is it institutionally what it's about? No, I would say it's not. But there are people who definitely agree with what you're talking about. I happen to disagree with them myself, but does this reflect on Black Lives Matter itself as a movement? I think that's what we're here to discuss.
Thank you, Eric. Fantastic. Creaky, anything you want to see in the chat? Anything you want to say?
No. Like I say, the chat is behaving itself quite well. But listen, everyone, don't forget, nobody submitted any questions yet. If you do have any questions you want to ask team or Eric, if you could start submitting them underneath the round one community poll.
There are a few there. I don't know whether it's not updated on yours. I've got 4.
Oh, right. Yeah, maybe it's that then.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah, sorry.
even when we get to like round 2, round 3, it's the round 1 community poll that I'll be looking at underneath for the questions. Just then they're all in one place. So if you just go to our community tab, that would be great. Erik, thank you again. Very articulate. You know, really well done. Team, it's your rebuttal time. Take it away, sir.
Yeah. Now, of course, this was. I'm just going to address his points here, not his rebuttal to mine. But so the first thing I would like to say is that that you speak on institutional racism. I believe there is a bias towards race. I don't think that at this point anybody can deny that. If you look at the prison systems are overwhelmed with minorities in them versus whites. It's definitely not an equal representation of the population of our population. However, when people start saying stuff like institutional racism, they need to be able to show that there's actual institutional racism going on. All studies that come from accredited universities, not just police, in like FBI or anything like that, they all show that there is no actual bias towards personal bias towards African Americans when it comes to arrest rates. Okay, they do show that there's a statistical bias towards the arrest rates, and that I do have I believe I have a study that I can pull up here in a second and read to you, at least to quote the study. But there is a statistical bias towards race when it comes to committing crime, and I believe that it's much deeper than just a police officer sees a crime happen and says, "Oh my God, I think it's a minority." We have to realize that. I believe in 2015 in Chicago, 80% of the defendants of violent crimes were African American. If that doesn't build a natural bias in the police system, that's unfortunate. And we can talk about how to change that eventually. But if it doesn't build up a natural bias for a police officer that's being sent out to a minority neighborhood to deal with a violent crime, to not expect the perpetrator of that crime to also be a minority it wouldn't make for very good police work. Now, I don't think that's the way the institution should be set up. I think that it's that what we do is as like I say we, but what the police do is that it becomes a natural bias. It becomes an expected bias almost, that they expect it to be something without ever really considering that it may be something else, and that may lead to biases based on like tickets and pulling people over and arresting people for crimes that they'd never committed. Like I do believe that you'll probably see more African Americans be arrested for crimes that they eventually get released on and never charged with, versus the white people. However, here's the problem. We have the real problem, in my opinion, comes down to socioeconomic status. Okay, we definitely see a bias, and there's many studies out there that show a bias, or not a bias, but a statistical significance between the socioeconomic status of a person and the number of people or the socioeconomic status of a race versus the number of people that get arrested for violent crimes of that race. And the study that I found was, and this one's actually linked in the description. Give me 1 second. The study showed that, of course, there were more whites that were killed than blacks. I believe it was 92% more whites were killed than blacks in 2018. And then I have the socioeconomic. That would be reference number 7. And then I might have to add this reference to it, but there's a reference that shows that there's about 4 million people, I believe, 4 million. No, it might be a little bit more. I need to pull these numbers up, but it shows about 140% more Americans that live below the poverty level. Now, one thing about the poverty level is that it generates more crime. There's absolute studies out there that show that that crime is being committed by people who are poor. And if you see that, you look at the percentage of people that are poor that are of a race, okay, and this goes to a statistic that I can pull up as well that said that 33% of all African American children in this country are living below poverty. Now, it may not be because they're intentionally putting Black people in that position, but the fact of the matter is they're in that position. Those 33% of children, they're having to live a harder life. It makes it harder for them to get an education. If they don't have a higher education level, they're going to be more prone to committing crimes. This is also another statistical correlation that has been proven. That education level is related, has a relation to the amount of crime that based on the amount of education someone has. People that drop out of school have a higher tendency to commit crime. People that only get a high school education, they have higher than the people that get to college, but lower crime than the people that dropped out in middle school. There are statistical studies out there that show that these are proven facts. When you have a system that continuously cycles somebody through the poverty zone in our population, you end up getting a racial bias there. I don't think it's directed at race, but I do think that it's so much of a statistical difference between the number of the percentage of African Americans that live below poverty, and that in itself, because the poverty, the socioeconomic people that are living below poverty are committing the crimes. They're the ones going to prison. They're the ones that's not there for their children. It's just it's a fucking feedback loop. It's a problem with our judicial system. It's a problem with our prison system. This needs reform. You cannot get reform by following the principles of Black Lives Matter. And I'm not saying that the movement that we were talking about earlier, the idea that all lives matter, but we need to focus on Black ones because society has given up. It seems that society has started to give up on the Black community. This is what we're talking about when I say this. I say, yes, I agree with you here, Erik. We need to focus on figuring out what's wrong with our society that keeps this group of people in that problem, in that continuous cycle of prison, poverty, lack of education, and ultimately having children who go through the exact same thing that they had to go through. And let's see, let me go back by my notes and check to see if there's anything else I'd like to talk about that you brought up. Again, yeah, that's pretty much, I covered everything. Institutional racism, the socioeconomic versus crime rate, because I do believe that every single person should be treated equally. I absolutely will agree with you 100% on that. There's no reason today that anybody should say to anybody else that you're lesser than I am because of race, because of sex, because of sexual preference, gender, whatever you want to do. You want to be a freaking spaghetti monster believer? Good for you. You know what I'm saying? You're crazy, but good for you. I think that everybody should have those ideals. And then one let's see. Okay. What is the real important conversation that you were bringing up earlier? That's the real important conversation, not how to let this group of people push the direction of our society into further looting, further rioting, trying to make, what incidents happen, individual incidents, blow them up into grander proportions. And they are organized. They're an organization. They are very well organized. They're well funded. And people are now dumping money into them right now religiously. And all they want to do is continue to push more riots, continue to try to get police departments defunded. And I'm not making this, like I said, again, this is not conjecture. The very first link in my list of links is a video that it goes to the BLM representative, the co-founder of the Toronto chapter. She's not just some nobody. She's the one that put it out. She's the one that said that BLM is all about defunding the police because we don't need them. They don't protect us. Her words, not mine. And I'll turn it over. Sorry, I was rambling.
Oh, it's again, like really articulate. Both of you really enjoyed listening to that. I'm going to set up the poll for round two. So again, it's on our community tab. So if you go to the community tab, you should see, and I'm just doing it now, a vote for Team or Erik on who you felt got the better of the rebuttal, and then we'll pass it over to the back and forth, and you'll finally get to hear them get into each other a little bit more. While I'm doing that, I'll hand you over to my partner in crime, Creaky.
Partner in crime, partner in something. Right, I'm noticing that people are starting to get a lot more talkative in the side chat. So if you've got something to say, don't be shy. Submit it as a question, because there seem to be a lot of opinions being thrown around, but not very many questions coming in. If you really do have something you think will add to the discussion, then please submit it as a question. Get involved. Don't just talk amongst yourselves in the side chat if you think it's relevant to what's being discussed.
Yeah, and just a reminder, if you have just joined, if you want to post a question, if you go to our community tab where I've been posting the polls for each round, if you go to round 1, underneath that's where I'll be reading the questions from, so I don't miss any. If you put your question under there, it will get read. We've got an hour of the debate left. We've got the back and forth, which I'm assuming, maybe half an hour. We'll see how they get on, and then plenty of time for your questions. So please do get them in there. So the back and forth. I mean, I don't know who should we start with. Should we just let them dive into it, Creaky? Who wants to start? Oh, Soundly's just asked a question. Sorry. Please give instructions again on how to submit the questions. Right. So Soundly, on the community tab for our channel, if you go to our channel, the community tab, we put our polls. We put the community posts. We've got polls up there. If you look at poll for round 1, and then put your question under there, you should see some others. Sorry, Creaky, I cut you off there.
That's all right. That's all right. I don't know why I can't do it, Catz. Maybe I'm just not important enough. But can you edit the title of the round 1 poll to say round 1 and questions? Make it self-explanatory.
Oh,
I just thought of that all by myself. It must be these new glasses. I can feel myself getting smarter by the minute.
I actually can't edit it. No, maybe there's a way to do it. Next week I'll put round 1 and questions. Yeah, always next time. Always next time. Right. So, should we hand it back over to him?
Yeah, fire away, guys.
Can I take it? Because
please.
I want to respond to kind of quickly here with team, because I think we're getting at a really central argument here. Is something like Black Lives Matter, or for that matter, protest as a concept, is it useful for creating social change, or is there a point at which it becomes a hindrance where it just polarizes everybody and makes it impossible to have a good discussion any longer because we can't talk anymore? And I think that's a very, very good question. I mean, I started by going back to 2013 when we first started raising this issue. I want to go back a little further because way back in 1979, on my 14th birthday, a man named Arthur McDuffie ran a stoplight in Miami. I was a punk kid in Miami at the time. And he gave the cops some crap. They gave him crap back, whatever. They wound up beating him to death with their flashlights. And when the cops got off for this in May 1980, the city of Miami burned for 3 days. And this was my first, I was, 14 years old. This was my first experience with this. It's been going on my whole frickin' life. And what I remember was the adults in my world, in my little, white suburban community, a lot of the adults were like, well, maybe things are going to change finally. Nobody was really upset about it. It's like, yeah, this was going to happen one day. And those of us who lived in Minnesota knew that this was going to explode one day, that sooner or later we would get sick of all the police killings, mostly black people, but also let's not forget Jamie Dimon, who was white, and some other people. It's a police department out of control. Sooner or later, things are going to explode. And you say to yourself, well, how useful is this explosion? Is this really advancing anything? And the short version is that what I saw in Miami is that everything changed after there was a tremendous amount of violence. Now, I'm not in favor of the violence myself, but it does appear that it's necessary for change. I'm not happy with that. I don't like it. But it seems to be true historically. And it seems to be happening now in Minneapolis, that people are finally going, wow, we've got to change things because big parts of the city burned down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And okay, so I agree with that to some extent. There's definitely change would need to happen when things like that. Changes do need to happen. Obviously, beating anybody with a flashlight to death by a police officer, somebody that you should have trust in, is absolutely wrong. There's no way that anybody's going to argue that that's right. Now that you say that the only way things changed was going to be through riots and looting and burning Miami for 3 days. Well, when you look back at it and you say, you have to ask yourself, was burning Miami the only way that was going to happen? Was there not a better way? And if there was a better way, then why wasn't that done? I mean, every time every time that something happens and we have this polarizing event and everybody wants to protest, things not every time does it lead to rioting, and changes continuously are made just based on peaceful protests. I believe peaceful protests can work. If I sat on the sideline for so long, not really denying what was going on, just never really wanting to take an active voice in it. And now that I want to take an active voice in it, I want to make sure that my active voice is used for the right reasons. I truly want the population to rise above this. You can't deny. Here's something you can't deny. All right, you can't deny that the lower class does not have as much confidence in the police as the upper class. Okay, right. There's a problem there. What's the problem? Where does it stem from? Right? I mean, in my opinion, it's the judicial system, because you told your story about growing or what happened in Miami. Let me tell you just a little bit about how I grew up. I grew up with all the races around me. My high school I went to, I was the second graduating class in the high school. Because the school was so small and so isolated, we had to bus kids in. We bus the kids in from the poor parts of town. That was awesome to me. I'm so glad I got to experience that, because it really kind of never made me really see racism as a thing. When I went to college, I was in an all Hispanic fraternity. I still am in an all Hispanic fraternity. In fact, I reached out to one of my fraternity brothers to consult him with how to do this, how to approach this topic without coming off like an asshole, because the last thing I want to do is be an asshole. Being an asshole when talking about topics like this don't get changed. Don't have people start changing the way they think. We need to change the way we think about how we institute law enforcement in this country. It needs to be fair for everybody. Did you know, and this is a statistic I want to share because it bothers the shit out of me. The average police salary in the United States was $60,000. The average African-American household barely brought home $35,000. That's a household. You cannot tell me that there's not a socioeconomic bias when the average police officer makes $60,000. The average police officer makes almost twice as much as the average household in America for African Americans. That leads to economic bias. It leads, when you have the people primarily in one class that are ruling over the next class, what you end up getting is a classist bias, a class bias, totally. and it's a problem in America. We need to fix that. Black Lives Matter doesn't help us fix that. We as Americans step up and step to the plate, start taking responsibility and fix it our own goddamn self.
Hey, okay. Now I'm with you on this totally, because part of the reason why I agreed to do this and why I started my own YouTube channel is that I do not support the violence. Just get back to my own personal story, talk about myself too much. After I left Miami, I went to school in Pittsburgh, and I literally lived in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Okay. He's like my guru, Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers.
Nice.
Not kidding, man. And I don't want to be in a world where violence is the only way that we can solve things. It does appear to be true, and it sickens me. I'm hoping that we can get things together this kind of way. And I really appreciate your reaching out and saying, hey, how can I avoid being an asshole on this? Because here's the thing. When white people who are part of the white world, white mindset or whatever, first jump into this, the primary barrier is, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to offend somebody. So I'm just going to keep quiet. I'm never going to talk about this.
Right.
Well, we're all going to screw up. We're all going to look stupid. We're all idiots, ding. And it's it's going to happen. We have to get past all of that. And we also, when we have conversations across race, we can't just like automatically go up and say, hey, you're a black guy. Tell me about the worst moment of your life. Tell me about that time when you really lost it, the most embarrassing, the most humiliating thing that ever happened to you, because I, as a white person, need to understand. That's not going to happen. But we do need to start having these quiet conversations and making them productive, because I really do believe and hope against hope that that is the alternative to these massive flare ups that leave cities burning for days. I am really sick of that.
Now, the problem that I see with that, violence is the issue, or is the key here, is that when you talk about who it affects most, and when you're talking about rioting and looting in order to make change, to make systemic change, you really aren't hurting the people at the top. Those people are well insured. The insurance companies aren't going to lose money over this. It's going to cost taxpayers money. It's going to hurt the people who the protesters, or not the protesters, because I'm all for peaceful protests. Ex-military, I fought for that right. I will support any person whatsoever with that right there to peacefully protest about any topic they want to talk about. Not a problem. But rioting and looting, it doesn't push the message forward. It's like spanking children. Do you spank children? And I'm not saying the African Americans are the children. I'm saying the people, the public, are the children. Do they spank the children to get the children to get in line, or is there a better way to do it?
Yeah. Well, I really hope that there is always a better way to do it. But I mean, to go back to what you said about socioeconomic status, yes, you're right. We use race as a proxy for socioeconomic status in this country because, unfortunately, it correlates far better than it should.
Absolutely.
So, we're talking about socioeconomic status is the main thing, and when we look at how quickly the George Floyd protest blew up, not just in America, but all around the world. That's what this is really all about. It is about lack of opportunity in the developed world to advance, and that people really feel they're being left behind. This is what I like to try and talk about. Everything we're talking about here has been decades in the making, and it's going to take us decades to work our way out. I do not believe that street action is going to solve the problems, but will it get people to pay a little more attention? I only hope it can be peaceful. And I want to tell you one story about a Black Lives Matter protest, and I'm trying to remember whose death it was. I don't think it was Jamar. I think it was Philando. So many people were killed by the frickin' cops in Minneapolis. Actually, Philando was killed.
The Philandro Castile story is absolutely fucked up. And I'm sorry. I don't mean to cuss. I'm sorry, Baldy Catz and bald guy next to Baldy Catz. Yeah. No, that was a jacked up story. I think there is the problem here. Like we do see things that we should not be seeing. Like I asked my son this, and I could not believe what I saw when I saw it. When that cop murdered that man in the hallway in Arizona, I believe it was. And I brought my son into the room, and I said, "Watch this. You need to see this, because this is wrong." And that guy got off of it. And that's when I started to really realize that, man, this good old boy system is really, really, really not the best thing for the American public. Not just the black people, but the American public. Because I can now understand where somebody like, that doesn't have money, that grows up in poverty, where they would feel a lack of trust when coming across a police officer. Whether it's a lack of trust because of their life or because of the fact that $100 right turn ticket is much bigger of a deal to that person than $100 ticket is to the some guy who owns a car dealership and sells 50 Ford trucks a day or a week. Like the impact of $100 impacts differently to different classes. And the unfortunate fact of the matter is like I said, 33, it's how can we have 1/3 of every African American child living in poverty right now? And what is Black Lives Matter doing about that? Like that's the question I keep asking myself, not the movement. I can understand the movement itself. It needs to be acknowledged, but the group, the people who run the organization known as Black Lives Matter, what are they doing about the 33% of the children that are the African American children who are living in poverty right now? They have no chance, or their chance. It's not that they have no chance, but their chances are immediately stunted. Their percentage, their ability to succeed, the same way my son was.
Yeah, dude, you're issuing a challenge to an organization to affect change and grow and evolve from being just a scattered movement of people to being something that's a permanent institution that fixes things. This is like the challenge of our world. What are the institutions doing? And I'm going to tell you that the millennials, my kids, do not believe in institutions as a thing. They believe in these flash crowd, we're going to organize by hashtag kind of things.
Yeah.
And is it really a good idea to have another nonprofit, as it were, that is working on this nationally? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Or should we just be trying to reform the institutions we have? What I can tell you from my work in the community in St. Paul is that the solutions to almost all of these problems are person to person in the community, whatever. When we talk about a national organization, you say, hey, what is this international organization doing about it? Yeah, you know what? I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I'm a little queasy about any big thing like that. And you're issuing them a challenge to make a difference or whatever. I think we all know that the changes have to come at the ground. They have to come person to person, first and foremost. It's where there are huge institutional biases that need to be overcome, like cops keep getting off all the time, that a bigger stink needs to be made at a national level. But does that mean we have a permanent organization that's responsible for all things Black? Probably not. Okay, I'll go that
No,
far.
I can understand that. I can understand that, but even if indirectly helping by maybe helping some of these businesses that were destroyed by the looters and rioters, that would be a step forward towards helping their community. Overall help towards a community eventually gets more and more people out of that poverty state, and I would love to see them instead of making political moves that are designed to push their agenda forward, maybe make a move out of just love for the community and help build up some of these businesses that were destroyed in their name.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things I want to emphasize, I really do believe that it is a small number of people that are the ones that you really dislike. And I want to give an example of a protest that I was at, actually. The Black Lives Matter group wanted to take over Interstate 94 at the Dale Street overpass in St. Paul. And they negotiated up to 20 minutes. We're going to go block the freeway for 20 minutes. I don't know. And so at the end of 20 minutes, they said, okay, everybody, let's get off of the freeway or whatever. And most of the people responded. I mean, we're talking about the Rondo community. They live there. They work with the police every day. I think former Chief Finney still lives in Rondo. Everybody was trying to be really cool, but there were a bunch of people who were left behind, who refused to listen to the leadership. And they started throwing rocks at the cops. One cop was really seriously injured by rocks being dropped on him. And they finally went in and busted everybody. They arrested like 42 people. All but one was white. And I think 2 of them actually lived in the city of St. Paul. The rest didn't. All right. And so all of the people who actually had to live in the neighborhood and deal with all of these issues from day to day, they were out there, they made their voice heard. And it's like, okay, let's get off. They listened to leadership. A small number of people wanted to be there to just F stuff up. And that really is the problem in all of these sorts of things, is that holding a peaceful protest and having it stay peaceful, it just winds up being an excuse for all kinds of weirdness and nastiness. And the socioeconomic problems have been lasting for so long, for so many generations, that a lot of people are getting more radical. They're listening to these more radical people, and they're like, it's time to go smash the system. There's still a tiny minority. There is still hope. You're
Okay,
asking
so
the question. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I do want to address something that you just pointed out here, and it's very this. I do see this so many times, and you can extrapolate this as far as you want, and you can use intersectionality to determine where you want to stop the growth of the bad apple, or the application of the one bad apple. I hear a lot of people say that cops are not just one bad apple. If there's one bad apple, the whole tree's rotten. Well, these protesters that you're talking about, these extra protesters, this small select community of Black Lives Matter that's doing wrong, that's pushing bad things, are they not the bad apples that you also talk about and that are in the police? I mean, every
Yes.
community, every time we get, well, then is the whole Black Lives Matter not a rotten tree? I mean, can we not say that by that same logic?
Well, that's the thing is that do we hold a citizen organization to the same standards as authorities? And is that at all appropriate?
Well, hold on. Let me. But when we're talking about one bad apple, right? We are literally saying that if there's a police officer that decides he wants to murder a person that day, that it's not every police officer's fault that he chose to murder that person that one day. Now, I'll agree with you that there's some systemic problems within the police force, like unionizations and some armed responses I think armed responses could take a step back a little bit. It's a little different because we're in America. People in the UK may not understand these issues over here, but we are literally an armed nation. Like the entire public is armed. So it's kind of hard to just say disarm the police. Okay, but then what happens? And it's not that you get the random gun person carrying a gun. It's that every other person is carrying a gun in America. And that's one of the reasons why the police do need to stay armed. But I do agree with not sending direct police out to deal with things, or not sending police out with mental health professionals, not sending police out to medical emergencies when it's just a simple problem like an overdose or something small like that. I think there's a reevaluation that needs to take place throughout the whole thing. But again, these bad apples do not define the whole tree. If we're going to say that the bad apples in an organization define the entire organization as a rotten tree, then we must also define that we use that same logic when we define Black Lives Matter as a political movement. And these guys are making political statements by standing out on the freeway and pushing that narrative to incite more and more people to join them on the freeway.
There's a point here where I'm afraid we might need to disagree, but we'll just see. Basically, justice. Number one, we want justice. We want justice. We want it to stop. Okay, great. Justice is based on individual accountability for individual actions. So police officers who commit these heinous acts of execution need to be held accountable for that. Okay. But it keeps happening over and over and over again, and that's proof that there is an institutional problem above and beyond the judicial sense of justice, that it's not just an individual. We can say that punishing individuals will put the fear of God in everybody, and that will change the institution by itself. That's kind of an iffy, sketchy kind of thing. Police departments do need more support. They're called on to do way too much. Many of them are really just not paid anywhere near enough. They wind up having to take jobs as a bouncer at a nightclub just to make ends meet. And we don't hold them to the same high professional standards. In Minneapolis, the police union is definitely a huge part of the problem. With you on all that. But
they in Camden, New Jersey, and I did a lot of research on this too. Not for this, actually. When I first started hearing about all this defund the police, disband the police, and I read the article in Time, time.com. There was an article there where it talked about the city council was just saying completely remove the police department. And I said, hey, you can't do this. This is like completely removing the police department. It says that nobody is there to enforce the laws that our legislature creates, our legislation creates. We have to have some kind of standardized way of enforcing the law. But if we look at what Camden did, Camden had unionized police department that was overpaid and underfunded. Okay, so when they say overpaid and underfunded, that means that the police department didn't have enough money to continuously overpay police officers who were being overpaid due to the union contracts they had. So what they did is that they disbanded the police department and brought in the sheriff's department and said, hey, you're now in control of our city police. And what did they do? They reduced the salary and then almost hired back the entire police force. And they used the extra money from the reduced salary to hire another 100 officers. And they turned the program into a armed response force to more of a community-driven force, which put police officers in the streets. And it was inconvenient for the people that lived there. But you know what it did do? It cleared up the drug market there. It decreased the crime rate there. It worked. Yeah. And so there are options that are out there that don't involve violent protests. And if the public, especially the public in Minneapolis, if they've lost confidence in their police department, then they really need to look at what happened in Camden, and they really need to try to find a way that the community can find a common ground with law enforcement, where they can find a law enforcement that they can actually trust.
They totally are looking at the Camden model. And the other thing about Minneapolis, I lived in St. Paul. The two cities touch each other. The downtowns are just 8 miles apart. Okay, they really are the twin cities. St. Paul never had these problems. It's about 3/4 the size of Minneapolis. And it always had a community-based policing system. It was always about the neighborhoods, always about that. And you just didn't have these problems where you had them over and over and over again in Minneapolis. And that's what was so frustrating to me, is that the solution is right next door, folks. It's just across the Mississippi, So we do know what works. It's just getting it to the point where it actually happens has been so frustrating. And it just.
But here's the problem, Erik. Okay, so you and I just, I'm going to say educated. You're educated. I'm, barely third grade education. White males, right? We can sit here and talk about this from this outside perspective all we want, but the truth of the matter is while we can say, yeah, look, watch Camden, it's a great idea. The presence of the BLM movement is putting the fear of law enforcement as a whole into the public domain. It is driving a wedge between what we need and what we want. And that's not, we don't want to not have law enforcement. We do want to have a law enforcement that we can absolutely trust, and trust from top to bottom. Not the upper class trusts more because they can afford to get out of jail more. They can afford to buy themselves high-priced lawyers that can weasel their way out of bullshit. No, this needs to be a fair society. If that opportunity is given to a rich person, that same opportunity should be given to a poor person, regardless of race, regardless of sex, regardless of orientation.
I'm going to agree with you this far, that everything seems to be radicalizing in our world. I mean, this is just one of the things that seems to be radicalizing, and that is happening because of the socioeconomic lack of opportunity, lack of any forward direction, and more and more authority just kind of clamping down on things all the time. The question becomes, how do we move forward from there? Because the world is getting more radical, and I don't think either of us like that, and neither of us see that as really providing the solution in the long term. So I'll go that far if we're in agreement on that. The question becomes, how do we become active in a peaceful way to promote the things that we know the change that needs to happen, community by community, heart to heart, and business by business.
Well, I think it's our responsibility to stand up and speak out against what's wrong. And at times when maybe we didn't, or at least I didn't. I don't want to say we as if everybody out there who's listening is in my shoes, but I definitely never really acknowledged the problem with the whole system. Like, what is wrong with this system? How do we fix this system? You said it good. How do we do it? Well, you and I, we can only do it by speaking up with our voice, speaking up with our voting, really being involved in the community. I believe if you're, one of the things that bothers me the most about the society, and I think this drives us to where we're going now, is that we put more focus on athletes and entertainers than we do on scientists, than we do on mathematicians, than we do on things that actually matter to the future of humanity. And I think that keeps people from wanting to be better than they already are. I mean, for me, it's simple for me to be in the same making the same amount of money, doing the same thing over and over. To change that, to make myself better, requires effort, but there has to be a payoff. And if I'm in the lower class, I'm sorry, but the effort, there's no effort there. If I'm going from $9 an hour to $10 an hour, I mean, it's a big percentage for what I'm making, but I'm still only making $10 an hour. Where's the benefit in that? We don't have a society that benefits or we don't have a society that recognizes the struggle of the lower class, and that needs to change. We need to see where we're at and say, how do we fix it? Because those are our brothers. Those are our friends, our family, our brothers. And America would be so much greater if we could get everybody out of poverty. Just think about that one thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is the heart of my whole basic shtick, which is that the basic social contract. You work for a living, and you get a decent. You work hard, you get a decent living, and things will keep getting better. That basic social contract broke down a long time ago, and it broke down for non-white people first, and has been more broken. But it's broken for just about everybody at this point. So we're all kind of in the same boat. If you have the right level of education, you have the right connections, you may not need to worry about it so much. But for everybody else in this world that is rapidly changing and jobs move back and forth all across the world and all that, what is there for you? I mean, do we actually value work? Do we actually value intelligence? The answer is no, we really don't. And
No.
That basic social contract has failed. So that's what we're really seeing playing out. In the long term, we're in total agreement. In the long term, that's what needs to be fixed more than anything else.
But can we fix that without violence?
Yeah, believe me, if we can, I am totally for it. History teaches me that things have to get bad before they get worse. It's kind of like, what does it take to have a drunk turn around their life? You have to hit rock bottom. I pray that this is what rock bottom looks like and it doesn't get any worse, please. Okay?
We're only 6 months into 2020, bud.
Yeah.
This is the worst year on record for me. Emotionally, physically, it's been draining. It's been taxing to think that to think that we're in 2020 and that we haven't evolved past the basic human rights of everybody.
Yeah.
How come we can't look at the next person and think first to ourselves, how can we help this person? Everything's me. Even with me, it's me. It's the way we are. And we need to change, and it's not going to change unless people like me start taking, accountability or not accountability. I want to stay away from that word because it's not accountability. I need to stand up and use my voice, even not as a YouTuber, but as a human being. When I see something wrong, I need to say something. I need to stand up and go, nah, you're wrong. Stop doing that shit. It's very frustrating.
What I've been told long ago, I mean, before you change the world, you have to change yourself. It's just that simple. Change comes from within, but also, love and decency and respect come from without. Long ago, I started asking people, what can I do as a white person or whatever? And the answer always came back is just be respectful and be pleasant and be good and kind to everybody and start from there. Because those simple actions on a daily basis will eventually like change your heart, and you'll start seeing things, and you'll start having conversations and little bits here and there, and you can very slowly change the world. Now this sounds, kind of like Beatles, la la, whatever land, but it is important to start there and listen to people and develop some empathy for the rest of the world, because life really sucks for a lot of people. And we all have our.
And it's something I want to point out, and this is something I think I do not want this to get lost on, because when you're researching your own points, you never, you kind of want to. You might find something that disturbs you that really doesn't support your side. And there is something I found that disturbs me. And this is the 13th Amendment of the United States of America. Now, it's an abolishment of slavery. And there's a small caveat to this abolishment of slavery. It says, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. If you're a prisoner in the American system, you are a slave. This is Amendment 13. Slavery is abolished except for you. That right there is a systemic problem.
Damn, that's a good point, man.
Guys,
I'm sorry that it doesn't go on. It doesn't support my side, but it's something that I see that is absolutely fucking wrong.
Sorry, just to step in there. This is going really well. I'm really enjoying this. We've got loads and loads of questions, so it's just a quick heads up. Probably in about three or 4 minutes, I'm just going to call an end to this bit, because there's so many really good questions from the chat I want to give you. So just to give you a heads up, about 3 minutes.
I'm ready to move on to the questions. Whenever Erik is.
We turned it into an agreeable love fest, so I think we're done. Go ahead.
Yeah, you okay? Right, we've got some absolute belters where I'm really looking forward to your response on it. Creaky, I'll just let you say what you want to say.
I'll be honest with everybody. I've enjoyed this discussion more than anything we've done on the channel so far. I was a little bit apprehensive. I had a conversation with Catz prior to the... I don't like even using the word debate, because I just it's a conversation. But I've got to be honest, team and Erik, absolutely amazing points from both of you. The side chat, some people are agreeing with one, some people are agreeing with the other. Everybody's, as we all know, everybody's got an opinion, and most of the time people are more than happy to share them. But as I've already said, and I don't want to repeat myself, submit a question.
Yeah.
Now is your last opportunity to do it. Sorry, team. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add to that a little bit. I want to say first off that these are the types of ideas that need to be discussed. These are the ones that they don't have a black or white right answer. That you say, well, we need to help one thing, but how can we help one thing and make sure that we don't hinder something else and don't create a problem in the future? When we talk about the shape of the earth or anything that's objectively true, it's really just a point and laugh session. There's no need to point and laugh. This topic is serious. This topic needs to be discussed. This topic needs to be, because there's no way will we ever find out which idea is bad and which idea is good without first discussing it and coming to an agreement on it.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to add that, when you look at a democratic republic, people talk about like majority rule and all that. The founding fathers of the United States set up a system very deliberately that's not based on majority rule, but on consensus, that nothing happens until everybody frickin' agrees on something. And that's part of the reason why it's difficult for us to move forward, but we need to be working towards that consensus about, we're going to try these sorts of things. We're going to move and move forward. And you can't get that consensus without endless, relentless debate. Another thing the founding fathers kept talking, like talk, to the point where that diverse group of people can be referred to as one thing, the founding fathers, because they came together.
Agreed.
Well, we've got 23 minutes, and honestly, there are loads of questions. So I hate to say, like, can we be brief with the answers? Because I know how much there is to discuss, but I mean, we've just got loads and loads of questions. I want to start this one off. This one caught my eye. I think everybody knows soundly. This is a question from him. Erik, I'm going to ask this to you first. Just want to make sure I'm reading this right, okay? It says on the Black Lives Matters website, he's got this quote, okay? We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement. So that's a quote from the BLM website. Soundly says, this is an attack on what most people consider as the fundamental unit of society, which is families, a healthy household with the husband, wife, and children. Why is it we can't oppose this organization's belief and association with violence without being called racist? And why should we allow this to stand without them being held to account? That's a long one. I can repeat it if you want me to, but
No, that's okay. If that's on the website, I missed it. I think in the course of this debate, I've been convinced that the core organization is getting a little more radical than this spontaneous hashtag movement that I've been a part of off and on for 7 years. If that kind of statement, I'm going to definitely oppose myself. I don't think that's appropriate at all. Talking about smashing capitalism, again, I'm against it. My wife is from China. We have strong opinions about communism in our house. So let's just not go there. But you talk about smashing the nuclear family unit or whatever, that's pretty danged crazy. I'm not going to go there. So.
Yeah, this is just from my research that I've done. I saw the same thing about the one of their core beliefs is to change the dynamic of the nuclear family. And then at the same time, I saw that as one of the core beliefs or one of the core things that Karl Marx preached when he was alive, had to do with pleasure and the role of like pleasure in relationships and how relationships were supposed to be more, I believe, love-based instead of more like of a business contract that and when they say the nuclear family, I believe they're talking about the idea that man and woman can come together in a business agreement with marriage to become one business entity in the eyes of taxes. Again, I didn't bring all this up because it was just how I came to the conclusion that they were a Marxist group, was due to some very Marxist ideas that they proposed on their website.
Yeah, let me just add one thing. I recently heard this from a very conservative Black person who had been with Black Lives Matter for a long time, basically saying, hey, this group is getting out of hand. When did we start supporting gay rights? I've never been in favor of that. They're obviously from the church-based Black community, which, as we all know, has led the civil rights structure. So, yeah, there's some conflict going on within the organization. Okay, all right. You may have convinced me on something here. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent question and responses. Creaky, I don't want to hog choosing the questions. So, if a question caught you, all right?
Yeah, this one's from Hank and it's to Team Skeptic. Team, so you say BLM is communism. Why are you scared of the truth? Black people are treated horribly.
Well, that maybe the question was asked before we got into the debate, where I absolutely admitted that there is a bias towards African Americans, whether it's an intentional bias or whether it's a socioeconomic bias, or whether it's just a statistical bias based on what a police officer may have to be going through when he comes up to a call where it's statistically proven or statistically shown that 80% of these calls lead to a victim of a certain nationality, and it also leads to a perpetrator of a certain nationality. There may be biases that end up being built into the way an officer reacts, or the way an officer handles a situation. And it may be intentional and it may not be intentional. It just may be systemic. I mean, it all depends. I think each situation's a little bit different. I think a bad cop would be a cop that goes into a situation and doesn't immediately start eliminating suspects just because he's overly sensitive or he's overly worried about his, natural biases.
Erik, have you got anything you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, well, I just want to point out that in terms of what it's like to be a black person in America, obviously with this skin color, I'm not an expert, but it's not just interaction with police. I mean, I walk into a store, I'm a customer. I had one friend of mine one time said, let's both go to the store together and see how things are. And he was clearly followed around a lot more. I'm like, oh God. So I got to see it firsthand. And this just eats away at people, and it's why they wind up getting kind of radical. So, what can we actually change? What can we affect change? Well, the authorities, the institutions, and all that. Yeah, we got to change that. What's in people's hearts and mind, how they behave, we'll work on it. It's going to take time. It's taken far longer than I hoped.
Okay, let's go for another one. This is first one of the night asked. Wolverine 6668. This is for both of you. Black Lives Matter say they want to dissolve the police. But what happens when they need a police officer?
Who wants to take it first? We kind of talked about that with Camden and so on.
Yeah. So, but I'll start by, because I've actually mentioned this on Twitter already. But if they completely dissolve a police force, which is what the original intention was, and anybody can read this, I'm not making this up. It says in the thing, disband the police force and then start enacting a community program that they know to work, where they would send mental health professionals out to certain calls. They'd send fire departments and EMTs to drug-related calls, but they never really discussed what they had to fill the void of law enforcement. I do believe what went on in Camden, after doing my research, I think that is the model. I think that the model should be looked at all police departments across America. I think they should look to Camden and say, first off, is my department suffering the same way theirs is? If it is, then you know what? Maybe you ought to look at their model, because their model worked. Their model reduced crime. Like I said, there's a lot of people bitching about the cops right now. They bitch about the petty tickets they get, but I guarantee you that their murder rate is down, that their the violent crime rate is down, drug rate is down. I guarantee you people having fucking overdoses are down. It all came together. It took time, but it came together and it worked. And I think every system in America should take notice of what they're doing. And I think because of what's happening right now, I do believe that many cops are looking at themselves in the mirror. You look at, there's mass quittings of cops. You don't know whether it's because they just don't want to be called racist, or they don't want to deal with rioters and looters, or if they just realize that maybe they're part of the problem, or maybe the system is a problem and they don't want to be a part of the system anymore. But I think there's a better way to do everything. And I really hope that we come out on top, reevaluating what we see as law enforcement in America.
Yeah, and I also want to add the excellent speech to the crowd by the police chief in Houston near you. That was it's around on Facebook. We need to find it. But there are certainly some wonderful cops. The city of St. Paul has Todd Axtell, who's really eager to help Minneapolis. I've known Todd for many years. He's a great guy. Got a little hardcore during all this. It was interesting. But anyway, yeah, in Minneapolis right now, they're talking about disbanding the police, what that would look like. Basically, they're kind of on the ledge, and they need to be talked back from the ledge a little bit. There are models for community policing and working together with community organizations where police have the right support, and it's not all about just send in the people with the guns, but send in the other people, the healers, the mental health professionals, yes, the preachers, all of that. Reevaluating who gets sent in, so it's not just always disco lights blaring. Okay.
Yeah, no, 100%.
That's people who are saying, yeah, disband the police and go from there. It's like, no. but
Erik, but let me reiterate this point about Black Lives Matter, the organization, the politically motivated organization that has come together. Their tenet, one of their pure goals, is to disband the police. Like not get a more BLM friendly police force in there. No, they want to disband the police. again, the quote that I read was directly from her video, and she is a co-founder of BLM Toronto. We're not talking about a small chapter here. And her quote, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, and this plays out in my own family because my eldest lives in Minneapolis and really wants to disband the police. Can I just say that? So we talk about this all the time. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, but that's where I think the problem is. That's what where I try. The one thing I want to push in this debate is that I'm not denying that there is a problem out there. I think the problem is so multifaceted that we're not going to be able to say it's the police. It's not just the police. It's not just capitalism. It's not just BLM. It's not just Antifa. It's all of us. Every last one of us as human beings right now. If you're a human being on this face of this earth, you should be disgusted with what's going on in America right now on both sides of that fence. And me, I try to be politically neutral. I think Donald Trump is a fucking idiot, a moron. Oh my God, he's a moron. Yeah, ding. I'm sorry. I don't want to get political with it. I don't want to start cursing and all that, but he's a moron, right? And yeah. I think that there is a bigger need to fight against BLM only for the sole reason because they have this very sexy message. Hey, come support us. We are all about equality, but it's not really about equality. It's about pushing their political agenda, and they're winning right now. They're getting funding like you would never believe, and this funding is going towards putting out anti-capitalism, pro-neo-Marxist political movements. We should be ashamed of ourselves for donating.
Interesting. Okay, you made a good point.
Again, brilliant, really articulate. We've got 10 minutes left. I think I chose the last question, Creaky. Have you got one you want to?
Yeah, let me just get back to where it was. Damn. Which one was it?
While you're doing that, I'm just trying to update the poll on the community channel. There is the round 3 poll up now. So for the back and forth that we've had, if you want to go and vote who you think got the best points out in that. Feel free.
How bad did I lose? How bad did I lose rounds 1 and 2?
Oh, I think I lost. Come on.
No, well, Eric, you won.
We'll give the results.
I'm bowing down to you, Eric. You win today over everything because you're amazing. You're an amazing person. You have some great ideas. I've truly enjoyed watching your videos and the rhetoric that you put out. I think that there are good points. Like I said, the one thing. When I sat here and thought to myself, I said, how can I do? I need to get my message out without being a dickhead, without being an asshole. And I went and watched your video and I was like, God damn it, I agree with like half the shit he says, half the stuff he says. And the one part that hit me was when you said Black Lives Matter does not mean that white lives don't matter. And see, for me, I think it's so important for me to push this message. And in fact, it is so important to me to enforce that message on my son. Like that's how much that's how much what you said strongly influenced me. And and it opened my eyes, and it really directed my entire debate tonight was completely influenced by you saying that one line, because I felt like my message was strong, but it needed to be along those lines. It had to instill that message right there was above all the most important message of today.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think it's. I mean, my basic shtick in everything is that we just don't value human life, human ambition, human talent anywhere near what we need to get anywhere in this world. And if you look at like developing countries, Asian tigers. I know this sounds like a diversion. I'm going to bring it back home. What makes a developing nation turn the corner and really get somewhere is when they realize that their population are not just a bunch of mouths to feed, not just a revolution waiting to happen, but they are the greatest resource of that nation, and it needs to be developed. And you see that happening in countries all around the world, and yet in the developed world, we are sort of devaluing our people. We're sort of tossing some people to the curb like, oh, well, you're just not making it. And it's like, two different directions. When developing nations become something and poverty is eliminated around the world, the pie should be growing, but it feels like there's only a fixed pie and they're getting a bigger share because we're screwing up in a big way and we're not taking care of business. We're not taking care of each other. And that's kind of my basic shtick right there.
Absolutely superb. So I've got to say, before we go on, there's loads of positive comments in the chat about the way you two have approached this. I think I've scrolled past one now. I can't remember who the name was. But
yeah, there's been a lot of supportive comments in the side chat cast. There was just one from Super Donkey.
That's the one.
Yeah, crazy topic to decide to have on the channel. Could have easily gone wrong. Props for making the decision to do it, and well done to both debaters. Well done to all. And it has gone very, very well, because a topic like this is so divisive. It could have quite easily gone awry. It's
especially given my history with people who don't agree with me.
yeah. So I found my question anyway. Don't let me lose it again. And this is aimed at both Erik and team. Mr. Jones, 1972, wants your opinion on why there are never any protests when one black man kills another.
Oh boy. Well, actually, I wanted to get back to the statistic and all that. Black on black violence is a genuine thing. It's talked about a lot in the black community. Unless you're really plugged in, us white people aren't necessarily going to hear about it. I'm just going to tell you. It is true that if the victim is black, the perpetrator is likely black. But also, if the victim is white, the perpetrator is likely white by really similar percentages, up around 80%. It turns out America is still highly segregated. There you go. Why are there no protests about it? There is a lot of talk in black communities. But is there enough action? Possibly not. I don't know that it's my call to make. This is one of those, I'm a white guy, I'm going to stay out of it. But I do know that in some black communities, there is a lot of action being put to it. We just don't necessarily hear about it in the big media that, has the news flash. Look at us. There's a fire. There's a shooting. There's a huge protest. Look at that. Stuff like that. The quiet conversations never make it to the news. Maybe that's problem number one. I don't know.
I'd like to argue that and say that, the news well reported on May 31st in Chicago, which I believe it was 28 people that were murdered that day. And this was a couple of nights ago or a couple of weeks ago now. And there was not much talk about, even though it was highly publicized, there was not much talk that came out of the official BLM organization. Again, they don't protest the black on black crime because it's not. If it was really about black lives, okay, if their movement was really about all black lives, they'd be doing something to improve the murder rate or the crime rate of black on black crimes. They'd make that a tenet, not pushing that the individual, of the 209 times that I mentioned that a person got killed by police in 2018, we all have to agree that there was probably a significant majority of those were involved in violent crimes, maybe preventable. I'm not going to say they weren't preventable, but definitely probably justifiable. And then when you take away those numbers and you equate the number of unjustifiable homicides in the African American community versus the number of total Africans that were getting killed, I believe the number was like 7,200 and something that I had earlier. I can look that up if I need to. It brings the percentage of cops being unjustly responsible for killing another African American down to even lower than 2.1%. That would really do more favors to the people who say that cops really aren't the problem. And I'm sitting here saying that the system itself is the problem. So I don't want to use that to support my case, because I really do want to say that we need to figure out 209 deaths is too many. Doesn't matter. To one innocent person that's killed by the cops is too many. Bottom line, the man who killed the man in Arizona, that guy, if I would have done that, If I would have had an AR that says you're fucked, held him at gunpoint in the hallway, and then shot him for fucking pulling his pants up, do you think they would say that was justifiable homicide? Abso-fucking-lutely not. They'd throw me in jail for murder, and this is where the problem lies. We don't hold our own people to the same standards that they want to hold the public, and that forms a distrust between the public and the police, and that right there needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to hold the authorities, if anything, to a higher standard than the public.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we possibly got time just for one last quick, because we do finish pretty much bang on 9 o'clock every week. Is it your turn or mine, Creaky? I can't remember.
There's one question. I'm going to steal the turn if that's okay, Catz, because this question keeps reappearing in front of me, and it's from David XP, and it relates to the violence specifically. Is it a help or a hindrance to the cause?
Right. I want to take that first. I believe it's a hindrance. In the long term, it's always a hindrance. Certainly right now, after the George Floyd protests have calmed down a little bit, I think any continuing violence is definitely a hindrance. It only encourages the reactionary. It encourages people to say, we need troops in the street, things like that. In the short term, have we seen historically that violence makes a change? I really hate saying yes to that. But it is a short-term gain. It gets people's attention. Now, once you have their attention, what do you do with it? Can you make positive change? That's probably all the difference. I want to live in a world where violence never helps and people cut it the hell out. But I fear that in terms of getting attention and getting that short-term reaction that is so necessary for authorities to wake the hell up, unfortunately, history teaches us it's been useful, and I hate that.
Team, do you want the last word?
Yeah, I think my entire point tonight was to say that I do not believe that it helps at all. I do think that violent things happen, and as a result of it, it does open people's eyes. Sometimes it can be a catalyst. But then you have to ask yourself, at what expense? At what expense are we going to hurt ourselves in order to tell ourselves that there's a problem? The thing I brought up about the other 3 African Americans, and this is just 3 African Americans that I happened to find pretty quick stories about these 3 African Americans who were killed by rioters and looters. And you ask yourself, if we're doing this because of George Floyd, right? How many people do we need to kill? How many people do we need to be responsible for killing before we say that's enough killing to make up for George Floyd? And it's not just killing of African Americans. That's happening. Just today, I presented 3 pieces of evidence to support that. That's 3 people, 3 more lives that did not need to be lost because of the abhorrent actions of the Minneapolis Police Department. So I will stand by my assertion that we absolutely need to identify groups that are violent and racist in nature. Ku Klux Klan, absolutely. Identify, point them out, identify their ideals, and explain why they're wrong. And that's what we're here to do tonight. And that's at least the position I took tonight, was that violence doesn't solve anything, and BLM is not here to help us.
Superb from both of you. Creaky, I'll pass this on to you. I think I've waffled on a lot.
Yeah, I've really got nothing more to add. This has absolutely been the best thing I have listened to on the channel so far. Maybe I'm biased because I know Team Erik, I only know as a commenter on my videos, but this has been absolutely fascinating to listen to.
It really
An
has.
insightful commenter. Always a good,
absolutely
some good comments. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate your work, all of you guys. It's been great. I never thought I would care about flat Earth. My wife isn't crap about it all the time, but it's like, no, this is interesting.
Don't forget to chill your channel out. It's linked in the description. Tell people a bit more about what you're doing, and people can get over and listen to a bit more of you.
Yeah, well, I'm trying kind of a big experiment. I used to be in research back when I was a chemical engineer, and I thought I'd try an experiment to see how valued authenticity is, where I sit down, I don't actually have a script, I've just been thinking about it, and I just talk about what's important to me in the most casual setting possible, like we're just sitting in a bar together, but we're talking about important things, and try to encourage people to think of important things as something that they can participate in, that are casual, that are part of an everyday life, and not something that requires a formal presentation that is perfect and all that. That we should be talking about stuff like all of the things that we were talking about today and a few more. That's what I'm trying to do. It's a big experiment, and we'll just see how it goes.
Well, honestly, thanks to both of you, and do check out Erik's channel. It's in the description. I'm blown away. I said to both of you before we started, I was going to learn a lot tonight. You know, I'm not very politically savvy at all. You know, so I stay away from talking about stuff like that. I've learned a lot. I've been educated a lot. It was a touchy topic, and you've honestly, both of you, done us really proud tonight, and really, really grateful for it. So thanks to both of you. Honestly, really appreciate it.
I was scared shitless, if you want to know the truth.
You had a potentially tricky point of view to argue from that could have led people to, you know, calling you all sorts. But I think you were really articulate.
Well, I do want to make sure that people don't walk away from this thinking that I'm for the oppression of Black people or anything. I am somebody who believes in the equality for everyone. Like, I'm not even kidding. There's not, like, you can't tell me, well, maybe mass murderers, maybe I don't pledge my equality for those guys, right? But for the general public, I never look down. I try to instill that in my son. It has to be so important, because that's how we make changes. We make changes through generations. When I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, quit worrying about getting out of the situation you're in. You're an adult. Forget it. Okay, there's such a small chance that you're going to get out of your situation. You don't want your child to be in the situation you're in, then set him up to succeed. So that way, when he gets to be your age, he's not going through the struggle that you're going through. And that's the only way that we can make this country truly progress, is to tell our children that this is not right, that this is something that needs to be addressed, and this is something that needs to change in our society.
Amen, brother.
Right. Creaky, I'll let you see us out, but thank you to everybody for being here.
Right. As always, there's links in the description to everything that Team Skeptic referenced tonight. The links to Erik's channel. And have we put Team Skeptic's links? Do you think he deserves to have his channel shared as well?
I'm going to put it in. I just kind of assumed that everybody knew who he was.
Yeah,
I'll put it in.
He's kind of a big deal, isn't he?
He is. He's pretty well known. Yeah, he's a bit of an operator.
Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I basically built both of y'all's channels. You do realize that?
Yeah,
you did.
And that's what I like about him. He's so modest as well, Catz.
I am I'm the most modest guy. I swear, my modism is so tremendous. It's hard to explain in words. My thoughts, even my thoughts, as intelligent as they are, they're struggling to make conceptual images in my brain to discuss how modest I am, or to describe how modest I am.
Well, thanks to you, the only image I've got burned into my brain is the image of you in a mankini. So if anybody would like to see that, then join me for my live stream on Sunday, because for some reason I was coerced into creating a Team Skeptic mankini emoji on my but you will have to be a channel member to get that.
Now I have to avoid your live stream too. Great.
The first time I see you there, Erik, I'm spamming the live stream. I told him I'd become a channel member if he added my emoji. He said yes. I said okay. I became a channel member. He has my emoji. Your channel is trying. How many? Let me ask you a question. How many subs have you gained since that day?
Oh Christ, I can't remember, mate. I can't remember. I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning.
Thousands of subs since adding my mankini emoji.
Quite absolutely. Possibly. It's definitely a draw. I may add it to my channel. Yeah, I may add it to my channel art. Right, everybody, thanks very much for... Yeah, I may well do. Thanks very much to everybody for being here. Don't forget to join us next Wednesday for another discussion, and we will see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
We offer...